and welcome to The Cine Skinny. It's a podcast from the team behind The Skinny magazine. It's Jamie Dunn here again. I'm once again sitting in for Peter Simpson, who's up to his eyeballs in work at the minute, so he sends us apologies. But we are joined today by Annie Heat-Barrows, who's back in the studio in person.
Hello. You make it sound like I'm a guest rather than one of the regular hosts.
Well, you haven't been here for ages. You've been down in London, you've been gallivanting, haven't you?
I've just been gallivanting in London. It was just 1 week. And then we took a 3-week break.
That's true.
So actually...
It was only 1 week of gallivanting.
It was 1 week of gallivanting.
Anyway, how are you?
I'm good.
That's good. And Old Faithful, Ellie.
That's me.
Jesus.
Never lets me down. He's always here. The stalwart. How you doing?
I'm not gallivanting anywhere. I'm not going down to London at all. I'm good as well. Thank you. How are you, Jamie?
Yeah, I'm good.
Yeah.
Almost full strength. We need to... When was the last time we had a full team? I can't actually remember.
I think it would have been in September or early October.
Yeah. We had one kind of recently.
Yeah,
Episode before last?
Well, hopefully we'll all be back because in the next couple of weeks we're going to be doing our top 10 of the year, which will be quite exciting. We want the full team back.
Yeah.
So Peter, get your work done and come down. He's actually just down here fixing up the tech. So he's here in spirit. And he was here 5 minutes ago. So yeah, first of all, I want to say thank you to everyone who made it to the Cine Film Club this week. We were showing Andrea Arnold's Bird at Summerhall on Tuesday. This is Tuesday, so it's very confusing. They're coming tonight. But this is coming out on Thursday.
It's going to be great.
I'm thinking to the future. Thank you for coming. And if you're on the West Coast, we can't wait to see you next week at the Glasgow leg of the Cine Film Club at CCA on the 13th. And talking of Andrea Arnold's Bird, we're going to be reviewing that on the show today. So if you're really keen for not having spoilers and you're going to that Glasgow show, skip ahead.
Turn it off.
Exactly. So we're going to be talking about Bird. We're also going to be talking about another hit from Cannes, Sean Baker's Anora, which actually ended up winning the Palme d'Or this year, the festival's top prize. And Arnold and Baker, I think, are filmmakers with quite a lot in common. So those two together seem to work quite nicely, I think. So that should be good. But before we get onto those two films, what has everyone been watching? Who wants to go first?
I can go first. I've not been watching anything special, but like it being the spooky season, or up until this point, the spooky season, I've been watching lots of horror films. Just seen some completely random ones, recent ones, like Immaculate is one that I feel like came out this year. That's like on Amazon Prime or something like that, which is about a nun in a convent. And it's very First Omen. But I've also been seeing some like classic sort of 80s B movies. I saw the 80s remake of The Blob.
Oh yeah, that's pretty good, I think.
I really, really enjoyed it. I think I have not seen the 50s Blob.
Yeah, the 50s Blob is very rickety. It's definitely improved in the 80s, I would say.
Yeah, like the 80s one, I don't know, it didn't get well reviewed at the time it came out, possibly because people were just sort of sick of the 50s revival that had been going on. And also, like, it's not, I guess, like, for its time, it wasn't that mind-blowing, but like looking back now, that's a freaky blob. It fucks people up. But also at the same time, I'm kind of like pro-Blob because it's following like the horror movie logic where it like kind of like targets sort of wayward teens. So there's like a creepy guy who's like creeping on his date, then the blob eats him, and then you all cheer for the blob. You're all on the blob side with that one.
Yeah.
And yeah, just like loads of little horror films like that. Saw the original Ring, which I'd never seen before, which I had underestimated the extent to which my knowledge of The Ring was just knowledge of the last 5-minute scene. Like everything that because The Ring has been referenced and sort of parodied 1,000 times in loads of different places. So I really felt like I'd seen the entire film. But in fact, everything that everybody parodies about The Ring, the whole thing with the tape and coming out the TV screen and all the imagery that we know with the well, like that is just the last 5 minutes of the film. It is the final scene.
Really?
And the film up until that point is just like a very slow-paced, quite atmospheric, but also quite subdued kind of, like, I don't know, week leading up to this horrific event. So it was still really enjoyable, even though like you weren't getting the imagery that you kind of expected. It wasn't necessarily like terrifying, but I don't know, it was a nice little like 90s nostalgia moment because like, I don't know, everything's cluttered and covered in like old computers and telephones and stuff like that. So it's quite a cool vibe film.
Yeah, I actually, this is going to be really bad, but I actually prefer the American version. I think it's scarier.
Yeah.
Like, because the American version is a bit cheesier. It throws in a lot of kind of jump scares and stuff.
Yeah.
Which, yeah, you're right. The Japanese one is actually quite slow burn until the end when it is actually terrifying.
Yeah.
The little well girl. What's she called? I can't remember.
Sakamoto or something?
Yeah, she creeps me out.
Yeah.
And you've probably not been watching too many scary films because we know you hate scary films.
I do hate scary
What do you do at Halloween?
Well,
like
when I
Hocus
was
Pocus?
yeah, when I was little, our big Halloween films were Hocus Pocus and Halloween Town. Did anyone watch Halloween Town?
I have seen Halloween
Halloween Town was great. Or we would watch like films that were supposedly a little scary, but so like Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade. I remember watching that for the first time.
That's pretty scary.
When I was like, 8 or 9 maybe for Halloween. And that was very cute. Right now I have been watching, I just went through a breakup. So I've watched 6 seasons of Gilmore Girls in 10 days.
Nice. I mean, that's what a doctor will prescribe you.
Yeah, I think so. I think that's like the actual scientific approach.
Yeah.
I've never seen parts. Have you guys seen the Gilmore Girls?
No, not in its
it's
entirety. I've seen episodes when other people have had it on.
I will say it is really worth watching. I think you might like it. Like the people are terrible, like truly dreadful, and they get worse and worse. But I think this time round watching it, this is like my, I don't even know, like 8th, 9th time, like rewatching the whole thing. It's such a screwball comedy. And I've been thinking about that a lot because we're going to be talking about Anora in a bit, which to me is also a screwball comedy. And so thinking a lot about like the conventions of how this stuff works. And it's very strange watching it because it's from the noughties, but to me it feels like it's closer in time to films from the 30s and 40s than television that is being made now, if that makes sense. Like just in the way that they talk, the dialogue, but also the dynamics, the way that the comedy is quite like comedy of errors. I don't know, it's like I feel very warm towards it, but also everyone in it is awful. Like truly the worst people you've ever met. Very interesting watching like this kind of perception of class from this American perspective, like all of the stuff about like the Ivy Leagues and Yale and just how entrenched that stuff is. And I think it really is, like, it's not a TV thing. Like it really is just like that. So yeah, I have, that's all. I haven't seen anything else. Like I cannot stress that enough.
Wasn't it Melissa McCarthy's like first ever role?
Yeah,
because I
yeah.
saw her in it when someone had it on. I was like, oh my god, that's Melissa McCarthy.
I think she was like younger than me when it started, which is crazy. Yeah. And I'm like the age, because in the first season, she's 32 and then her daughter is 16. So her daughter is now the age that she was when she had her. That's like the whole conceit of it, which means I'm now older than the woman in the show that has a 16-year-old daughter, which is upsetting. But we're not going to think about that too much. But that's what I've been watching. What have you been watching?
I've been kind of watching a throwback as well, kind of. So I watched Juror number 2.
I'm seeing that tomorrow.
Yeah,
I'm so excited.
Yeah, it's the new, probably last Clint Eastwood film. I was interested in seeing it, but people have been really excited about it. People are calling it a masterpiece. I don't think it's quite a masterpiece, but I think it's satisfactorily old-fashioned. Mm-hmm. It's a really kind of old-school film. It feels like a 90s film. It could actually be older. It's got kind of Hitchcock vibes. Essentially, it's quite a goofy idea. I won't spoil too much, but it's essentially Nicholas Hoult is the juror, number 2, and he's in this murder trial. So this boyfriend is accused of murdering his girlfriend. And then halfway through, well, not halfway, right at the start of the trial, he realised, actually, I killed the girlfriend by accident. he realised, like, he had a deer, like, a year ago, and actually thinking about it, actually, it might not have been a deer.
That's crazy.
And so he's in the situation where he could come forward and say, actually, I think I did this, but then he's got priors. He could go to jail himself for years. Or, he'd just been to a bar. He's an ex-alcoholic, or I guess he's an alcoholic who's in recovery. He's just about to have a new kid. He can't do that. But he knows the guy's innocent, so he has to like steer the jury away from convicting him, but at the same time not incriminate himself. And it's a real kind of tense nail biter, I think. And Nicholas Hoult is really great. He's like a bit like a kind of Hitchcock kind of character in that he's like pained throughout. He's like sweating and clearly not slept for weeks because of this trial. Yeah, and it's a really, really good performance. I think he's actually quite an underrated actor.
Yeah, he is.
He's usually very good at comedy. Like I think he's like great in things like The Favourite or that the show where he plays like
The Great.
The Great, where he's Captain Great and he's like the Russian I can't remember her husband Barry. He's really funny actor, but this is one of his best dramatic roles. You know, and it's quite a slight film. There's not really much to work with, but he's good at it. And it's for what it is. It's a very kind of solid, very entertaining, like little moral drama.
Hell yeah.
You know, so like not trying to do anything fancy. It's very kind of straightforward, but yeah, I really enjoyed it. I'm glad everybody was hyperbole about it because, yeah, I probably wouldn't have went otherwise.
No, I assumed it would be really shit. Like, it's Clint Eastwood, whose like films have got like pretty bad over recent years. Like, it looks quite like middle of the road. I would have assumed that it would just be like a throwaway film, but then apparently it's incredible. Yeah, which is so exciting.
I wouldn't go in with such high expectations. I think it's solidly very entertaining.
But that's what I want though. Like, that is in itself a miracle.
But yeah, Juror number 2, go and see it. Okay, on to Bird, which is the 6th feature from British director Andrea Arnold, and her first narrative feature since 2016, amazingly, which was American Honey. It stars newcomer Nykiya Adams as Bailey, who is a 12-year-old girl who lives in a squat with her live wire single dad, Bug, who's played by pod favourite Barry Keoghan. And he kind of acts more like her big brother than her parent. He's like, he had her when he was really young, and he's a bit of a loose cannon, shall we say. So the pair lock horns early in the film when Bug reveals that he's rushing into marriage with Kaylee, his new girlfriend, who Bailey doesn't care too much for. Also living in the squat with Bailey is her half-brother Hunter, who's part of a vigilante gang. And life at Bailey's mother's home is even more chaotic. Bailey's mum is called Peyton. She's taken out with this nasty new boyfriend from Liverpool, who's a piece of work, and he's treating her and the 3 young kids who live there pretty terribly. But Bailey does find some solace away from home, though, when she meets the title character, Bird, who's played by Franz Rogowski, another pod favourite. He's this mysterious German man who wears a kilt and is looking for his parents who used to live in the town. This is at once a kind of very kind of familiar Andrea Arnold film, social realist film, but in other ways it's very different. Anna, should we start with you? What did you make of this?
Yeah, I did enjoy this quite a bit. I don't think it's like a perfect film, which is maybe a little bit what I go into an Andrea Arnold film expecting. I think she's so good at making very delicately observed, very lived in, like fly on the wall films, especially American Honey and Fish Tank as well, had such a documentary sensibility to them, but they are like these fiction films. And yeah, you really have this sense of being in these characters' lives, and the way that she observes them has this very like socio-realist, but also incredibly like compassionate lens. And I think that's like the hallmark of her films. And they're often propelled also by really, really good performances, often with like new or non-professional actors. And this film is no different. You get such a good sense of Nykiya Adams's sort of internal world, both through her performance, which is one of those really incredible ones where the way that she's performing, or the person that she's performing, is incredibly guarded. And so it's actually really hard to see into the character. But through that, you actually get such a sense of who this character is, their fears, their way of like being in the world. And so there's this real like intimacy through the wall that they're like putting up. And also through, the way that the camera like follows her. Barry Keoghan is unhinged as usual, but like a much warmer and sweeter kind of unhinged, which is like nice to see. So all of these markers of her films are there, and they're really, they function in much the same way. They have much the same effect. But I find this quite a strange film in a way to talk about, because I think its component parts I absolutely love. And it feels a bit like a film that should be like made just for me. But when I think about it as a whole, it maybe didn't leave as much of an impression as I thought it would. I didn't feel that she did anything here that she hadn't already done either in Fish Tank or American Honey in a more interesting or novel way. I think there's a bit of a lack of coherence as well. There's a kind of tonal shift partway through the film, where like the genre of the film almost changes, which is quite bold, but also just a bit strange. And then also like a lack of coherence within the different like narrative arcs. That has like a bit of a dreamy effect, but also a bit of it makes the film feel a little like slight or flimsy, maybe. So I don't think it's altogether the most successful thing she's ever done, but I would say it is worth watching. There is something really, really gracious about it, which I liked.
I totally agree. Yeah, I think it's a really interesting film that does have some contradictions in it, and it's not necessarily that those contradictions get in the way of what's interesting about the film. I think they're just a completely separate, interesting thing by themselves. So yes, it is sort of like a social realist, right? But at the same time, it's like a very extravagant film, and like, I don't know, sometimes it feels as though the eye is a little bit misplaced. Like we see that these council flats that are like covered in graffiti, but they're covered in so much graffiti, it almost sort of looks like a nightclub, you know, and everyone's just dripped up a little bit too much. Everyone's like got really nice nails and jewelry, and that can kind of, I think, interrupt some of its grittier attempts at like depicting domestic abuse or gang violence. So, you know, sometimes they kind of overdo the set dressing, but it can be extravagant in other ways, the more appropriate ways, like the characterization. Like these characters do feel quite otherworldly, quite dreamy, but at the same time, there's so much interesting about them. I'll get to Barry Keoghan, but Nykiya Adams, I think you're right, and he is doing this really great performance as a kind of very guarded character. The fact as well that like what she sort of uses as a shield around this world that she's becoming increasingly alienated by is filmmaking. So whenever a stranger approaches her, the first thing that she does is like put up her phone camera and kind of just record and capture that as a means to protect herself, which just is such an interesting thing to watch. And then Franz Rogowski is really the perfect like imaginary friend in this film, kind of like super otherworldly, a bit of a sort of manic pixie dream boy who doesn't really seem to react with the same sort of fear or aggression that everybody else is, instead just sort of like curiously like observing everything. And then there's Barry Keoghan, who sort of has like Big Ken energy, which is a bit weird for like this film. Like he is an asshole, right? He's like a controlling and quite unreasonable and unreliable father, but one that the film often exploits for comedy. So whether it's him cutting about town on his e-bike or arguing with his friends over whether or not Murder on the Dance Floor is a shite song after all, like it's a very self-aware role, and it's like very like bold and dominant. I think that it's delivered with the awareness of like who Barry Keoghan is now as a kind of like viral sensation. So that's like really interesting. It's hard to tell if it flows well with this particular film, but it's in there and it's definitely compelling to watch. So there is like a lot going on, and I felt, for me at least, that it was a film that had a very big world to it with loads of characters, but that might have just been, in fact, because we kind of kept shifting perspective. Like the opening sequence, for example, we're following 11-year-old Bailey or 12-year-old Bailey, and she gets on the back of her dad's e-scooter and we drive through town, but we sort of see it through his perspective, where it's just filled with all these like sort of chaotic communal like families who are all like grinning, and he's so like happy-go-lucky. But then at the same time, when she's tailing her brother to see this quote-unquote vigilante justice that he's doing, because we're seeing it from her perspective as a spectator, we don't really understand what he's doing and the severity of the violence there. And then when we meet her mum, that reveals a whole new side to this character, a more like sort of caring, like older sibling version of herself that we only see when she shows these characters to Bird. So it's like, yeah, the film is heavily populated with different perspectives and tones. And I think that it does quite like make it a very nebulous thing, that it's hard to see exactly what it is we're getting out of it. But I did enjoy it. Like I did find it really interesting. I was sort of with it the whole way. And I felt that particularly with those really strong performances and like some very clever camera work, that like the emotional moments definitely hit for me. And, you know, I was working sort of with these tonal shifts. So I did enjoy it. It's a weird film with like lots of sort of contradictions in it, but it was quite enjoyable.
Yeah, I agree. Like, I think about with Andrea Arnold, she's doing something that a lot of people can't quite do. I feel like so often when I watch a filmmaker who goes to places like this, you know, kind of poverty-stricken places or places you'd think is downtrodden, there's always a kind of like safari aspect. You feel like it's like a little bit kind of leering, or kind of like, you know, poverty porn is maybe the phrase, but I never ever feel that with Andrea Arnold. I don't know, there's something about the way she films these environments, whether it's in Red Road, she goes to the Glasgow flats in the north of Glasgow, or, you know, Fish Tank, she's in Essex, or there's American Honey when she's in the Midwest, these kind of like blasted places. She finds a kind of really poetic way of shooting them, and I don't know, like she doesn't shoot, the funny thing is she's not sugarcoating how these places look, she just sort of finds a kind of sunnier version of it. So this estate you're right. Like it maybe is a bit overdone, like or overdressed, like But then that kind of makes sense, I think, because it seems like actually this is almost like a fantasy. Like, as much as I'm saying it's a social realist film, it doesn't feel like a Ken Loach film. There's a kind of poetic, lyrical way she shoots the film that doesn't make it feel like a kind of gritty movie at all. So I think some people might go into it, Andrea Arnold, thinking, oh, it's going to be a slog, but actually she finds real poetry and beauty in these places, and I kind of like that. And I think she goes in, maybe part of it's because she's very unjudgmental. So you're right, Bug, this father, is a bit useless. He's like he doesn't really take care of this young girl. Like the place they live in is chaotic. He's having parties in the middle of the day. But I don't think she shoots him to make him look bad. She like suggests that actually he's just a guy who had a kid when he was really young and is a kid himself. That's the kind of, it's a very kind of open-hearted film in that way, and she's a kind of open-hearted filmmaker. And I think you can see that with all the ensemble. And then it becomes really interesting when it comes to social. It becomes a kind of more magical film. It actually makes you think. It makes all the kind of the earlier part of it. I can actually think is the whole thing kind of magic? Are we seeing the kind of this kind of world through a young girl's eyes? Because when she starts like using her phone and stuff, clearly it's a girl with an imagination who's trying to maybe escape something that's maybe not the kind of a comfortable lifestyle. And that's all kind of really great and interesting. I think where the film maybe falls down is she doesn't sort of give every element as much kind of love as she should. For example, I feel like actually the way she shoots the mother's house is a little bit different. I feel like the mother character is not well developed at all. Mm-hmm. And in that way that we feel much more sympathy towards Bug, who Bailey's now living with, and not with her mother. And there's probably a reason she's not living with her mother, because maybe her mother's household is even more chaotic and there's much more love in Bug's household. But I feel like I would just like to have seen a bit more of the mother, or heard a bit more of her mother, and heard a bit more of her situation. So that was just, to me, one of the flaws of the film. But you can't really fault the cast. I thought the cast was fantastic. I thought, again, Franz Rogowski, instantly when he was on screen, he's like a pixie or something. It felt, even before it became a magic realist film, I felt like, oh, it's magic realist because he's so otherworldly. He's like, he comes in, like, he just appears, and the tone of the film changes with him on screen without anything really changing in the filmmaking. Like, there's a little bit of wind or something, but it's not like it changes style. It's still social realist style, but it becomes magical. So yeah, the film is good. It has a real kind of good sense of humor as well. Like, I love the use of music for comedy. Like, there's a really good Coldplay joke I felt in the film.
Yeah, that was good.
Like, there's also a very good Modern on the Dance Floor joke. Just about dad music. There's a whole kind of running theme where they're singing the Blur song, the Universal, mm-hmm. and that pays off towards the end. And I think what really won me over with this film, for all its flaws, is the ending is actually really lovely. It has a kind of real kind of hopeful, maybe you could say naive ending. And even the ending, there was a couple of moments where, like, for example, the vigilante stuff disappears. Like, there's mm-hmm. these kind of kids roaming around who are slashing up paedophiles, but we don't know if they're slashing up the right people. It's these are, but because she's so unjudgmental, she doesn't really pass any judgment on this kind of behavior. Mm-hmm. So at the end, you have Bailey winking at the kind of leader of the gang, and that seemed like a flaw, but I don't know, it just kind of worked. Like, the film just kind of worked on me. I don't know, I can't exactly say why it worked. I can see why people hate it, and like, it has been kind of badly reviewed by other people. I think
like badly reviewed.
Well, I mean, I don't mean badly reviewed. People didn't like it. They kind of gave it negative reviews.
Oh wow.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think it's that. It's just more that it doesn't live up to like her previous standard of like truly impeccable work. But I don't think it's like a bad film.
Perhaps. But yeah, anyway, it won me over with its kind of like open-hearted ending, which I won't spoil, but I just left the film with a real smile on my face. And yeah, I think she's a really great filmmaker with a really great eye. Her aesthetic is fantastic, and she just knows what she wants. Did you actually read the scandal about like Big Little Lies?
Oh yeah.
Because Andrea Arnold was like the director of that, and then they took it away from her.
Yeah, for the second season.
Yeah.
Or that she did direct it, and then they went in and they brought Jean-Marc Vallée back, and he like re-edited and redid the whole thing.
So I haven't watched it, but I'm kind of angry. I kind of also want Andrea Arnold to do well.
I know,
Because like, what?
It's
scummy
crazy.
Treatment.
Yeah, it's crazy. It's crazy to have Andrea Arnold, of all people, directing your TV show, and then you treat her like that.
Yeah.
Like, that's insane.
I know. Over Mark Valley, who's kind of the most boring director.
Hey, I like Wild.
Yeah, I actually do like Crazy, who's Yeah, so should we do some letterbox scores for this one?
Yeah.
Okay, who's going first?
I'll say 3.5 stars.
Yeah, me too.
I think that's fair. 3.5. Yeah, it's a film that doesn't quite hold together, but I think it's got loads of charm. So that film, Bird, is out from Mubi from the 8th of November, which is this Friday. And obviously, hopefully see you in Glasgow next week for the Cine Skinny Film Club. Should be good. Okay, on to Anora. Indie filmmaker Sean Baker has made 8 films now, but he really broke through with the last 3, which was Tangerine, The Florida Project, and Red Rocket. And I think his latest, Anora, looks like it's going to be its most successful yet. The film introduces us to Annie, who is an exotic dancer at a Manhattan strip club, whose life takes a turn when she dances for a client named Ivan, who's this kind of gawky son of a Russian oligarch. Ivan hires Annie later to come to his Brighton Beach mansion for sex, and then eventually to pose as his girlfriend for a week. While there's money involved in the relationship, they do seem to actually have a genuine connection and end up getting married on a wild weekend in Vegas. But when Ivan's family gets wind that their precious heir has married a working girl, all hell breaks loose. This film won the Palme d'Or. It's getting a lot of buzz. Ellie, what did you make of this one?
I really enjoyed it. I had a great time. Eat the Rich is back. I went and I knew vaguely about the plot, but I really didn't know what I was in for when I sat down. I just know that it had won the Palme d'Or. And I was like, I know this is not the way that film festivals are really judged, but I was like, I wonder if there's a little like Palme d'Or moment in there. Like, you know, the clip they always use. I wonder what that is whenever they like, you know, are showing off how great this film is. And then I sit down and the first shot of the film is like a row of people getting lap dances set to a remix of Take That. And I'm like, that's the Palme d'Or shot right there. That's second next to ours is just a write-off. It's one. But yeah, like it starts really strong and it's got a really strong first act that is essentially 21st century Pretty Woman. It's like even going in with our kind of current cultural hostility to billionaires and nepo babies, Mark Eydelshteyn is like immediately quite likable. Like I think he is a really good love interest for this story. He's in this huge ridiculous mansion, but he never feels as intimidating as his wealth does. Like he's quite charming. He's just running around all the time, like sliding around on his socks.
Yeah,
like,
that's the thing. He's been called the Russian Timothée Chalamet, and he looks a bit like Timothée Chalamet. But he also reminds me of. Because I always say, like, Timothée Chalamet acts with his whole body.
Yeah, the
and
physicality.
He does that. He kind of, like, bundles into scenes.
Yeah, he really does, like, embody this just big kid in a really, like, quite, fun, carefree, quite harmless way. So he is kind of like a perfect romantic character. And it's like it's a good love story as well. Because it's like, it's not just that he's really rich and, like, flies her off to Vegas and stuff like that. And they have this big, crazy montage, which you can sort of imagine the kind of thing kids would really glamorize or romanticize on social media or whatever. But like they also just go to like a sweet shop and like muck around and you get like a real sense of this chemistry emerging between them. And then, I mean, I don't know how closely we're describing the plot here. I don't think it's really spoilery, but like after that first act, he just hits the fucking bricks. He just sort of vanishes from the film and, you know, he just sort of like runs off screen and that's where it gets it sort of mutates a little bit. It's a bit more like Triangle of Sadness. Not so much in that Triangle of Sadness was like a very graphic film or even that it split its 3 acts into 3 smaller films, but just in that it becomes this kind of very anti-capitalist hangover of that first act of the film. Like you've got all these people out looking for him, these sort of like, I don't know, they're like employees of the family or whatever, but they're the most like chuckle fuck henchmen you could imagine. They're not bounty hunters or anything like that. They're quite powerless, just looking for this kid, going around in the middle of the night in, where is it meant to be? Is it meant to be like
it's like Brooklyn, Brighton. It's Brighton. Is what's called Little Odessa, which is Brighton Beach. So
Brighton
it's like
Beach,
it's like Coney Island and that kind of.
Yeah,
Yes,
it's like quite like it's not a glamorous place really, and they're just going around showing like his Instagram thirst traps to complete random people, being like, "Have you seen this kid?" And they get into like bitching matches with like wait staff and parking attendants, and that's really really quite funny until it just keeps going on, and it kind of doesn't. Like everyone just becomes incredibly tired and frustrated and it's just not funny anymore. It's like quite sad. And it's that flip side of of your fantasy of billionaire, cute boys who are also like worth £1 billion and just get to do whatever they want all the time, is that you can ruin so many people's day. You can ruin so many people's like week life just by doing whatever you want to do at that moment. So it's got this quite like scathing, sort of almost Parasite caliber point to it, but it still manages to be quite funny and lively and like quite thrilling too. So definitely, yeah, I can see why it won the Palme d'Or.
Annie?
Yeah, so my friend described this as a screwball comedy, which we were talking about earlier, and it kind of unlocked the whole film for me. Because obviously Sean Baker has done these, you were saying that he has this like similarity with Andrea Arnold, and it's not similar in tone really, but it is absolutely similar thematically in that he's interested in people on the margins of society. And so all of his films often like deal with sex workers, but yeah, people of kind of suffering under the particular like class system of America essentially. And he's looking at that, and all of his films have focused on that. And I think I went into this one thinking that theme would be, especially the sex worker theme, would be really predominant. And it obviously is, because she's this exotic dancer and there is this Cinderella pretty woman storyline that it then kind of subverts and tips on its head. But it is absolutely a screwball comedy. It's like watching fucking Tom and Jerry, honestly. It's so silly. The stuff with the goons. I love the goons. I love the goons so much. I've been seeing so many memes. There was like one, have you seen that meme where it's like a really skinny cat and then a really like round cat, and someone's like the two henchmen? That's the exact vibe of this film. And I really loved that about it. I think that's what makes this film feel really, really special to me. It has like such a through line with his previous work, and he's saying something, like everything that you said, Ellie, like that's kind of his message, that's what he's saying, but he's doing it in a way that actually feels quite like old-fashioned and quite unapologetically a good time at the films. Like it's very like Harry Styles, it's a movie, you know, which I really loved about it. Mikey Madison is incredible. I also spent a long time after this film Googling how you get, like, you know, the glitter, like the tinsel hair that she has. But it's hard with curly hair. Like, I think you need quite straight hair, so I can't have that. But she looks so good. She looks so great. Like, the energy is amazing. She is a screwball heroine in that she is not afraid to answer back. She's not afraid to be loud and angry. And it's just such a good, like, back and forth.
Beats fuck out of the people in this film.
She beats the fuck out of people. And then, but there's a kind of safety to the film as well, which I really like, in that she's not really in danger. And I also really appreciated that from, like, this kind of male filmmaker who has made his career, like, talking about, like, sex workers' lives, is that you kind of know that she's safe. And she's not structurally safe, but you don't ever see her, but she will kick the shit out of someone else. And I also really appreciated that. So yeah, I just had such a good time. I think it's the first film since Challengers where I was like, sat up. Do you know what I mean? I was like, let's fucking go. Which is what films should do.
Yeah, I totally agree. Like, I love the opening where, you know, like, people say sex work is work. Well, it's like literally shows the hard work of being a lap dancer, the kind of grind of it. Yeah. It's like, oh, it's another guy, or you know, like, or the hustle of like getting people to buy like champagne, or like it's just like a lot of work, you know, like, and then you see them, like, the women bitching about it later. It's like, oh my god, like, you know, but it's like there's not like a, again, it's like it's maybe part of it is also a real kind of like open-hearted look at it. Is not, there's not any condescension. He goes in, he shows the rough with the smooth, you know.
Yeah. And
it's like these girls are having a lot of fun. There's a lot of solidarity between the women, but you know they're having to work their arse off, like, to get like money out of these guys. So that's really, and it actually even shows like being a goon is hard work as well. You know, it's like being a goon's tough. You know, like even the head goon. I love how, like, you know, I'm sure we all recognise this when your boss gives you a call and you realise I have to drop everything and make my boss happy.
And he's like in a christening.
He's literally the godfather for a kid who's given a christening to, and he hands the kid to the priest. Sorry, I had to go. So like, yeah, so he's got sympathy for the goons as well as the sex workers. I love that. Yeah, and I love the shifts of tone. You know, so like, it's a really sweet romance, you know, and yes, you know, there's money exchange, you know, she's working this guy, but he's actually genuinely quite charming and sweet in a geeky way, you know. I love how, like, after sex he just wants to play his stupid games and she's like, fine, I'll just sit and watch you play like Call of Duty or whatever you're doing, you know. I love that. It's like, it's really sweet, really funny. I love just the design of the film as well, like the fact he lives in a really nice mansion, but it's kind of like quite gauche, like is that kind of like, is the idea of like he's rich but he's that kind of quite tacky rich, you know, and it's like, it's quite good at like going into that kind of environment as well. And then, like you say, you have this kind of amazing night of like just exhaustion, and the performance is all great. I actually think, as much as I think Mikey Madison and Mark Eydelshteyn, I think is it, are both fantastic, both absolute star makers. I think the best character is actually, I'm just going to check his name.
Yuri Borisov?
Yes,
Yes.
he is so good.
Who's the guy from Compartment Number 6?
He's from Compartment Number 6. He's actually, for a film that's full of like lots of loudmouths and kind of wise guys, he's the quietest person in the film. He's very watchful in the film, but once you catch on to the, like his eye movements and his little gestures, he's so charismatic and so watchable, and it's like, and it's him falling in love a little bit with, Anora over the night is also kind of fun to watch. It's almost two love stories together. But what I love as well is like it's a you know, like it's this rush of a film, a screwball, but it also has this ending, which at first, when I first watched the film, I was shook by that ending, like because the film is like so sugary and so fun and so vibrant until it's not, and then it really hits you that actually what you've been watching is not a comedy at all. It's a tragedy, and it's tough and as wise and as like brassy as Anora is, Annie is. You know, she can break lads' noses and she can, like, you know, kick knee shins, and you know, she's tough. She's like, but she is vulnerable and emotionally, and you realise actually this is incredibly draining on her at the, you know, so you've been laughing all the way through, but actually you should have been crying because she has been treated so badly. And yeah, that ending really hit home, and I don't want to spoil how it ends, but it's just like a real bucket of water on the face to like a really hot fuzzy film, and it just leaves you kind of walking out a bit dazed, but it really stuck with me, and I think actually in retrospect it's probably the perfect way to end the film. But again, it's just a film full of tonal shifts, hugely enjoyable. You know, sometimes you can't always recommend the Palme d'Or winner, you know, like, I'm not always gonna, you know, like,
I'm not telling my mum about Tatane.
But then sometimes like something like Parasite or something like this comes along, which is so fun, but actually really smart and saying so much about the world and so much about labour and capitalism, and you know how people from different worlds are treated. And you know, you can imagine the Hollywood version of this would be horrible, but you know, this film, I'm glad people are enjoying it, and I'm really glad in the world.
Yeah.
Do you think it's going to do well at the Oscars? That's the big kind of chat.
I hope she does, is the thing. I think, wait, was it to you guys? Maybe in the voice note I sent from London, I said it was like Sean Baker's first Oscar film. But now that I'm thinking about it, was Florida Project.
I think, Willem Dafoe was for best supporting actor, definitely. I can't remember Florida Project. He may also maybe... script, maybe?
Yeah, maybe. But I don't think he got nominated for, like, direction, did he?
I don't think so.
Yeah, so I would love to see him get nominated for some stuff, but I think it should be her year, I think. She's just so good in it. So good. Yeah, no, you're right. It was just Willem Dafoe got Best Supporting Actor. So yeah, if Mikey Madison gets Best Actress, that would be incredible.
We should probably do Letterboxd.
Yeah.
I'll say 4.5 stars for this one. Really enjoyed it.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah.
I'm going to say 4.5 as well, but it could be going up to a 5.
It could be a 5,
It's
yeah.
like, the thing is, it's so fun to watch. So like watching it is a 4.5, but actually it deepens, and I kind of want to watch it again to see it with like with the ending in mind.
Yeah,
and like
I'm seeing it again tonight. I think it might go up to a 5-star, to be honest. Yeah.
Okay, so that's very good. You should definitely go and see it. It came out last week. It's playing quite wide, I think, so you should be able to see it in most places. And seeing the big screen is really fun. You know, it makes it Take That song cool. You know, this is how good it is.
The needle drops more than once on that Take That song.
Take That song, the Tattoo song as well.
Yeah.
Tattoo song.
Yeah. Oh, the needle drops are great.
So as you can probably tell from our discussion about Anora and Bird, both are films that pull the rug out from under the viewer's feet a little bit with their surprising shifts of tone. So we thought it would be a good opportunity to talk about some of our favourite films that do just that, begin as one type of film but do some sort of switcheroo in terms of their tone or their genre or their style. So when I was thinking of this, I realised actually I kind of thought there was quite a lot of great films that did this, that start as one thing then bifurcate into something completely different. I was thinking, for example, Psycho, which starts as this kind of like woman on the run with money before becoming a kind of murder, where we follow the murderer instead, which is kind of interesting, one of the kind of early examples of it. Parasite's actually a good example of a film that's kind of like starts off as this kind of class comedy, becomes a much darker kind of horror film almost. And, something like Sound of Music is one, because it starts off as this kind of sunny, like musical, but then it becomes about Nazis invading Austria, so like, I think it's, it essentially does, it's quite dark.
No, you're so right.
But yeah, I was also thinking of Titanic, which is like, for the first hour, it's this amazing love story and then becomes this amazing, like, disaster movie. Yeah, so like, I just wondered, what do you guys think of when this subject came up?
Yeah, it's really interesting how you're defining it, because I would not have thought of a lot of those as tonal shifts. But now that you say it, I guess they kind of are. I guess the thing with Psycho that was always like the big kind of surprising thing was almost less like the genre shift but more the narrative perspective.
Yeah, a character shift.
Yeah, the character shift, that you think that, oh, she's the famous actress that we're like focused on, and then she just disappears halfway through the film and someone else gets brought in, which I suppose is a kind of shift. But yeah, it goes from like a kind of...
It goes from like a noir to a horror.
Like a noir to a horror. Yeah, exactly. But I think maybe I'm so used to the horror part of it now that it just kind of colors the whole thing. But yeah, it's kind of tricky. Like, what is the difference between this and a really good plot twist? Because I think the film that me and you were going to talk about, Ellie, it is kind of a shift, I suppose, but it's also just... It's as anarchic and insane as the rest of the film.
Yeah, it is wild. So we're going to talk about Sorry to Bother You.
Yes.
But it turns out we both prepared. Sorry to bother you.
To be fair, I have prepared nothing. If that helps.
If you have not seen it, it's director Boots Riley's 2018 comedy film where Lakeith Stanfield plays a down-on-his-luck telemarketer who learns from a fellow black employee that by using his white voice, he becomes incredibly successful in his workplace. And his white voice is an ADR of David Cross. So it is kind of slightly already magical realist. It's slightly speculative, satirical. There's this fictional megacorp that we keep hearing about that could very easily stand in for like Amazon or Google or something like that. But it is just exploring ideas of like workplace unionization and where that intersects with black identity. It is a comedy, sometimes in the US Office way, where there's like a little bit of cringe humor, but there's also a lot of like visual gags. For example, like the guy that he really looks up to at work, who is the power caller, he's like the hot shot at the office, is played by Omari Hardwick, but voiced by Patton Oswalt. And he just has like a handlebar mustache and an eye patch. And it's like, it's never really reflected on, but it is just like a little silly, a little surreal. And then that tone throughout the film just instantly in one moment turns into a very bad trip. Almost as if like a jump scare, really, like this little sort of metaphorical like microcosm of like late stage capitalism just accelerates into like a sort of dystopian final act, almost like a little bit of Cronenbergy body horror in there, and sort of like existential dread as well. And the weird thing is that it's not as though the comedy is just like shuttered out of the film. The comedy just sort of adapts. It becomes less about visual gags and more about just sort of like gross out and what the fuck. But because it really does just pull you for one, it's almost more like the film is playing a prank on you. It's laughing at you rather than the other way around, which is a really interesting sort of shift in dynamic. So it is a film worth checking out. I don't want to get into exactly what the twist is. It's 2018 sort of like hot off the presses political humor is unfortunately still quite relevant. So it's definitely worth checking out if you wanted to sort of like have the vibe of a Jordan Peele film that you did not know was a Jordan Peele film until the third act. But unlike Titanic and unlike Psycho, which I think of as, I was right, I also didn't really think of these as examples, but that's possibly because I think of them not as quote-unquote tonal shift movies, but definitely as two-part films. Instead of three acts, it is like two very distinct halves of the film, whereas this is, I think what's so interesting about Sorry to Bother You is that the real sort of manic nature of the film that defines it only really comes up like halfway through the third act. Like it is a very late stage development in the script, but still one that like really colors people's like ideas about the film.
Yeah. It's weird actually, just thinking about it now, we should also mention David Lynch. He does this all the time. Like if you're thinking like Fire Walk With Me.
Yeah.
It's very like, again, you may be right, that's like it's like definitely one act, and a second act, there's like almost like we're talking about films that don't have the kind of line drawn through it, like where it just seamlessly changes from like being one thing to another. Yeah. And obviously in Titanic, the iceberg hits, so there's like a defined moment when that happens. Whereas like I guess you're thinking about something where it's a bit more kind of like seamless. Is that what you're thinking of? Yeah,
maybe, or just maybe something that feels. I guess like Titanic doesn't feel surprising. Maybe because I know what happened in Titanic.
Because another one I was thinking about is a film that's been referenced a lot with Anora. So like supposedly it was influenced a lot by Something Wild, which is one of my favourite films, the Jonathan Demme film. And that, I know you've seen it.
I haven't seen it.
Oh, you haven't? Okay. Well, it's basically Melanie Griffiths like sort of seduces Jeff Daniels and sort of takes him on a kind of whirlwind weekend. Like a kind of getaway where it's like a real kind of sexy kind of romp, kind of screwball. And the kind of plan is because she wants to take someone to her high school reunion. And it's like she's introduced them to her mom. It's like a very sweet film where he meets her mother and, you know, it's like, and they go on the kind of road trip through America. Real kind of sweet romantic comedy. Quite sexy, quite fun. And then Ray Liotta just turns up. And this is like an instance of just one character changing the tone. So Ray Liotta is her ex-boyfriend. He's at the reunion and he turns up and the film shifts from this light, effervescent comedy to a really dark thriller where essentially he's a very dangerous person and he will hurt people. You know, like he's like scary. And that's the kind of thing that Anora doesn't have. It has this tonal shift. It doesn't have like a scary character. There's never, you know, like we say, Anora gets hurt emotionally, but she doesn't really get hurt physically. Yeah. There's never a suggestion that's going to happen. But this is like really just changes the whole film on a dime. So that's an example of one person doing it. So that's also interesting.
But yeah, it could just be the introduction of like a character who really complicates the plot, or it could be like a plot twist where you didn't expect it.
It's a bit like Bird, actually. Like Bird is a social realist film until it's this not. Interesting German man walks on screen and like it changes the whole kind of tone.
But what I think is what I think people feel, or at least what might contribute to the success of Anora, is that it does have this sort of, whether or not it's expected, it does have this definite tonal shift, right? Where we go from this very clear-cut romantic sequence into like a much more undefinable but comedic kind of space. Like, I don't know, maybe this is just my experience, but like, you kind of know that the romance will not work out or that it will have like a complicating factor. But then once that began to happen, once the ball got rolling and Vanya runs off screen and like fucking like the guy from The Bachelor, like who does that 8-foot vertical leap into the wild, like I from there really didn't know where it was going to go. So it's not even that it was necessarily a shift from one genre to another, but it was a shift from a genre type film to a much more like genre less sort of drama, which I thought was really interesting and probably why like it's kind of captivating as a film.
Yeah, I actually like these genre tests, but I was going to give an example of a film that has a tonal shift that I do not like. So have any of you seen Mute Witness?
Nope.
This is a film from like 1995. It's like, I think it's like a cult film because I've just seen loads of like critics like raving about it online, like on Letterboxd and stuff. So I just thought it's like, it was Halloween, I'd watch it. It's by Anthony Waller, who's a British director, but it's shot in Russia, and it's kind of a real kind of like weird European kind of feel, you know, because there's like loads of like Russian actors and British actors and American actors. But it's a really great horror until it's not, and then it becomes a comedy. And I was really disappointed because I loved this film for like the first half. So it starts with this. It starts with giving a clue of how it's going to play. So it starts with this really creepy scene of a guy stalking a woman in her house. So it's like from the point of view of the killer, and he's going to kill her, and it's really tense. And then he kills her, and she like falls around and like starts pulling the curtains, and you realize actually you're not watching a real movie. You're watching a set, and this is like a set on a Russian film where this woman is a bad actor, and so it gives you a hint that this is going to be a film that's tense but also a comedy. And then the whole film plays out like that because it's about, as the title suggests, the main character is mute. She's the special effects woman on the film, and she gets locked in the studio one night, and she can't shout for help because she's mute, so she just has to hang around. But then somebody starts shooting a porno downstairs, and she I know it sounds crazy, but so they'll shoot a porno, she's looking, she doesn't interrupt because she's just a bit embarrassed, and then it turns out it's not a porno, it's a snuff film, and there's a murder, and they find out she's there, and it becomes a real kind of tense. It feels like it's about 40 minutes of her on her own. It's almost silent, and her going through this studio, running away from these murderers. Really tense. And then what happens is the film becomes the most goofy spy film afterwards. And it's like a film that I'm really frustrated because for a while I thought this is one of the best films I've ever seen. It's actually one of the most tense, well-directed, stylish horrors that's ever been made. It's like I thought I found a undiscovered masterpiece, and then it just becomes the stupidest, most annoying, most predictable. Well, it's not even predictable. It's just daft, and it's like a real disappointment. So like, and sometimes it's not good to have a tonal shift. It's basically my long way of saying that. Yeah. Sometimes it's good to stick with the tone that
the
works.
thing that you had. I feel like that a little. Well, no, not really, because this is still one of my favorite films. But Otto Preming's Laura
that's a good one.
is a good one. Yeah, because again, is it like a tonal? It's not quite. But the premise of it is that this woman has been murdered, and the PI on the case, who is so sexy.
Dana Andrews?
Yeah, he's so hot. He's so hot in this film. He falls in love with her portrait. And then halfway through the film, spoilers for Laura, which is, I think this year, 80 years old. So you should have seen it already. It becomes clear that she hasn't died, that she was sent away. And then it becomes more of a slightly conventional, but still really, really fucking good, like mystery kind of, but no one has been murdered. And so it is actually really, really clever. But sometimes when I watch it, I really want to stick with the bit where he's in love with someone that's dead in the portrait. You know, like that is such an interesting premise. And it does just stop halfway through. And like what you're kind of sold the film as being about becomes something else, which is still actually really, really fucking good. But yeah, that's another one maybe that I think of with this.
It's hard to think of, because that's the thing. When I think of tonal shifts, I think of like, you're right with Mute Witness being like a horror and then a spy film, where it's like tonal shifts usually do involve some kind of genre shift.
Yeah.
So it's harder to think of like a horror film that has a significant tonal shift but is still a horror film afterwards.
It happens a lot in horror. Yeah. One is maybe Audition. Have you seen that one? That's the Takashi Miike one. That's where it's like a romance. So it's like this guy meets this woman, and like they're having a really nice date, and then halfway through it turns out she's a murderer, and she basically kills him. It's like so dark, but it's like, I mean, it's the problem is it's one of those films you really wish you saw when it was first made, because it's such a romantic comedy, and it's like you would not, if you saw it in a festival, you think, oh my god, this is like such a cheesy little movie, and then my god, this woman is crazy. So like, yeah, that's one film. But like, you know, see, like obviously I wish I could go back in time and see Psycho for the first time. Like, you know, once you know the twist and the change, like Audition is another one. So that's a twist, but it's also like a real tonal shift. It becomes like a much darker film. But yeah, it happens in horror a lot. Like I was thinking Cabin in the Woods is a good one.
Yeah.
So Cabin in the Woods is like, presents like a cheesy, I guess like
cabin slasher.
Yeah,
like,
yeah. It's the kind of thing you've seen a million times. It's like basically Evil Dead, but like with like hotter, you know, like modern day Americans.
Yeah, Chris Evans, fucking Captain America.
Exactly. But then it becomes...
No, Thor, one of them.
Yeah, but then there's a twist, but also it becomes more of a comedy and a satire and a more comment on the horror genre. And I think a better film, but so yeah, sometimes it like you say, it doesn't improve. So it just becomes more interesting. Maybe like sometimes it's good to just know what you want to be and do it. So anyway, we're kind of a fan in tonal shifts.
Yeah,
maybe.
Yeah,
Why not? Then you get like multiple genres. You get like, if you don't like comedy, you can get some horror instead.
Yeah.
So everybody's going to be happy. It's like
If you weren't enjoying the film up until now, just keep watching and it might be a different film in 5 minutes.
Yeah, it's like when you go and see, like, I always think it's fun to go and see anthology films because it's like, there's going to be one of the films you like.
Yeah.
So it's a feel like that. There's going to be one and a half of this screwball comedy stroke horror you're going to love. So yeah, that's our show, guys. It's all done and dusted. If you came to Bird and enjoyed it, I hope you did. And if you're coming next week, say hello. Is there anything else we've got to say before we go?
I think that's it.
No.
I think that's it. I think you should go and see Anora. You should go and see Bird as well. You should go and see Juror number 2.
Yeah, I'm going to that tomorrow.
I'm convinced I might go see it now.
Yeah, sounds sick.
And yeah, we'll see you next time. Bye.